Do you know the number one thing that surprises engaged couples? Take a guess. The sheer amount of decisions they have to make while planning a wedding. Indoors or outdoors? How many guests? Are kids invited? Controversial. Which cake flavor? Seriously, how do you even begin to figure out what's right for you? That's where Zola comes in. Zola has everything you need to make every wedding decision a piece of cake, from choosing your dream wedding venue and vendors to deciding how to best spend your budget. With tons of customizable wedding websites, save the dates and invites, every detail will feel like you. Zola will even help you choose the gifts, experiences, and cash funds you really want. The next thing you know, you've planned your whole wedding all in one place. From getting engaged to getting married, Zola has everything you need to plan your wedding in one place. Start planning at Zola.com. That's Zola.com.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. I'm your host, Jim Chapman, and it is Christmas week. As a matter of fact, it's just a couple of days before Christmas. Our regular episode drops on Monday this week, so it's the 23rd when you're hearing this. And I hope everyone out there that's listening is spending time with family and friends and just making a great week of it. So I tried to figure out what I was going to do this week as far as episodes are concerned. And look, I get a lot of questions on this show as I've been going along, and I thought it'd be fun to do an episode where you could ask me anything you wanted. And I promise I'll answer it honestly. And I had a great response to that, and we're going to go ahead and kick it off. And Miss Sherilyn Reed asked, what story was the hardest to research to date? And that's a great question, and I can answer that one pretty quick. And I don't know if I would term it the hardest episode to research. It just took the most time. And that was my very first series on Exposed, which covered Vince McMahon and a lawsuit that came out against one of his employees. And I believe the name of that episode was Vince McMahon's ownership of Janelle Grant. And let me tell you, that was a 3-part series that I did that kind of kicked off this whole thing. It wasn't difficult to find the information. It was just a lot of moving parts, and it took me forever to kind of put everything in chronological order with that case. Man, that was a tough one. If you haven't heard it yet, go check it out. Very first series we did on Exposed. Thank you, Miss Cheryl Ann Reed, for that question. And next we have Lindsay McNeil, and she said, hi, Jim. I appreciate all your hard work to bring listeners the scandalous tea. I live for it. 2 questions for your Ask Me Anything. First, would you consider doing a segment on the BlackRock controversy? And would you consider maybe 1 or 2 cases a month, something like FBI major cases, Operation Greylord or Illwind, or corporate disasters like Wells Fargo and Enron? Some may not be full episode worthy, but as Churchill said, those that fail to learn from history. Thanks. And I loved that question. I'm going to answer all these. And that's right. Churchill did say those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So to answer your first question, BlackRock, I absolutely would consider doing an episode on. You know, with what we do in Exposed, one thing I try to stay away from is too much in the way of conspiracy theories. But man, that's a fine line, because some things you think are conspiracy theories that are actually legit. And I'll tell you one thing interesting. As I'm recording this, of course, the big news this week is the drones that are flying all around New York and New Jersey and all these places, giant drones, and supposedly nobody knows where they came from. And one of them somehow, I don't know if it crashed, this is like breaking news, but they were able to get their hands on one of them. The police in New York were, and they even took a picture with it. They tracked it back to a company, and that company is actually owned by BlackRock. So the theories continue, right? But I would consider for sure doing that at some point. FBI major cases, you brought up a couple of those. I would definitely consider doing those. Wells Fargo and Enron, great examples. I actually have some experience with Wells Fargo that I could even share on an episode of that. So the answer is yes to all those questions. And I will tell you, I have a series. This is breaking news, y'all. In January, February, March, we are dropping a lot of episodes that are going to be part of series content. And one of those is going to be on the Boeing scandal going around right now. For those of you that are unfamiliar, there were some whistleblowers with Boeing that came out about some pretty crazy stuff, and they died mysteriously. Several. Too many to be a coincidence, if you ask me. So we're going to be covering that. That would kind of fall under that category, that BlackRock type category. So look for those coming in January, February, and March. And Miss Jessica Tinsley Anderson asked, how many hours weekly do you work in your studio total doing everything it is you do? Great question. And the answer to that is a lot. I work a lot. I'm a accepted workaholic, I call that. I have pretty much always been this way, at least in my adult life. When I matured, I had a kid. All of a sudden, I call it workaholism because I had a lot of responsibility. And so I probably work on average about 16 hours a day and have been doing so for many, many years. And I'll tell you, it's weird because I don't consider this work. This is what I do. It's how I eat, right? But it does require a lot of time. And for those of you that may not be familiar, in addition to doing this show, I host 2 other shows. I produce like 6 other shows. So I'm constantly doing something, but I love every minute of it. And I say it all the time. Y'all keep loving it and I will keep doing it. But those hours, to answer your question, Miss Jessica, are harder and harder to find. There's no doubt about it. Thank you so much for that question. Ryan Reynolds asked, what inspired you to start exposing these stories/cases, and how long have you been interested in helping expose these scandals of the elite, people/celebrities? Great question. And it's really a twofold answer. The very first series I dropped, which I already mentioned, was on Vince McMahon and a horrible lawsuit filed that was very descriptive against a female that worked for him. And honestly, when I was done with that series, I thought, okay, it was going to be a 3-part series sitting by itself, and never again was I going to do anything else. Well, within days of dropping, I think it was the 3rd episode in that series, I read an article, and that article referenced Cassie and her lawsuit against Diddy had been settled like the next day. And I knew that wasn't right. I knew when you're accused of something and you didn't do it, you're certainly not going to pay millions of dollars the day after someone sues you for it. So I went and got my hands on that lawsuit. And when I read it, I said, whoa, I got to do a series on this. I thought it would be a couple of episodes. The next thing you know, everybody and their mother is suing Diddy. And those 2 episodes that I initially started with became now 20 episodes and counting. But the inspiration for all of this really was the Vince McMahon story and the Diddy story kind of combined. Those 2 really made me look at what was going on here and saying, I need to continue exposing celebrities that are getting away with this bullshit. And that's why I do what I do now. So thank you for that question, Mr. Ryan Reynolds. And Miss Andrea Johnson. Oh, she's got a good question. Will Oprah ever be investigated? And what happened to the girls at her school? Why is she buying up land in Hawaii? Honestly, Andrea, I'm going to have to look into that. I'm not real familiar with what you're referencing as far as the girls at her school. I'm not really sure what that's about. I'm sure it's something interesting. Yeah, I would do an episode on Oprah. One of the things that makes this show unique is I try to stick to cases that are open and there's already been, an arrest or something that I can refer to legal documents, so I'm not putting out what you would call theories. I have something there legally to back that up. Now, that's not all cases. The majority of the time, I try to separate my show that way. Certainly, if she was ever arrested for anything or charged with anything, I would cover her. And I'm not saying I wouldn't cover her anyway if it was just blatantly obvious that she had done a bunch of dumb shit. I just hadn't looked into her a whole lot, to be honest, but that's not saying I wouldn't. Thank you for that question. Miss Lisa Frankowski, one of my faves. Shout out to her. And she said, what made you get into true crime podcasting and what did you do before? Well, this is a great story. Before I was a podcaster, because crime came later on in my podcasting, I was actually an outside sales manager for a paint coatings manufacturer, kind of like Sherwin-Williams, but we were on a little smaller scale. So I went to chemical plants and job sites and things like that. And I was your go-to paint guy, if you will. Did that for over 20 years. Now, during that, which was my life at that time, I was looking for ways to promote my company, promote myself. So I would go on job sites and I would make YouTube videos. I'd go to these painters that were painting and I would say, hey, show me how you touch up a sheetrock wall. And they'd touch that wall up and I'd make a little video and I'd put it on YouTube and I'd say how to touch up a sheetrock wall. Through that, I had a friend who owned a business and I kind of had some traction on YouTube with those, I would call it do-it-yourself videos. And my friend asked me if I would feature his business and just do a little video and put it on YouTube. I did that. And through that was born a podcast called Local Leaders, where I was interviewing small business owners in the community and just kind of telling their whole story of how they got into whatever it was they were doing. I have a big passion for small business owners, and I felt like that was something that I was being drawn to. Through that, I had a podcaster named Woody Everton on my show, Local Leaders, because he had a business and his business was podcasting. He was one of the top true crime podcasters in the world. I thought, I want to have this guy on my show and find out how he did what he did. And I had him on Local Leaders and it was like peas and carrots with me and Woody. This was probably back in early 2020. We became very good friends. Things happened and I ended up producing Woody's show, Real Life, Real Crime. Through that, we formed a podcast called Bloody Angola, where we talked about prisons and we talked about the people that inhabit prisons. And through that became what I do now with Exposed. And also I learned how to produce other people as well. And now it's become a business where I own an actual media company that manages other podcasts. So it's a lot, but it's a crazy story. And if you would have asked me back in late 2019 when I started podcasting, if I thought this would ever be my full-time job, I would have told you no. I was completely happy in the career that I was doing. I was making good money. I had been doing it so long that I didn't have to put in a whole lot of effort to do what I did. Kind of built my own territory, but God had other plans. And that's how I ended up doing what I do now with Exposed. So thank you for that question, Miss Lisa. And next we have Miss Janelle Ward. And Miss Janelle Ward asks, how do you choose which cases to cover? Another great question. And to be honest, it is different in every situation. It has to be something that I have an interest in. That's first and foremost. I don't care if something's out there and it's the biggest story in the country. If it doesn't interest me, I don't really have an interest in putting it out there. And the reason for it is when you force yourself to do a podcast due to like popularity or something like that, it's not going to be a very good podcast. It's going to be obvious that you are forcing yourself to tell it. So first of all, it's got to be a story I'm interested in. And from there, it's got to be a story my audience is interested in. And I think I have a good feel for what you guys and gals like. And so those two things have to play a big role. With Exposed, we have a lot of series-related podcasts, Bad Teachers. There are a million of them, unfortunately. But there's only certain ones that I think have enough meat to them, if you will, that I want to go ahead and podcast it. There's something in there that interested me, caught my eye, whatever. So thank you for that question. Next, we have Mr. Caden Green. And he said, how do you engage with your audience? Do you take suggestions for cases? And I'll answer both of those. And first, with the question on how do you engage with your audience? Very active on Facebook, very active on Patreon. As a matter of fact, the last bonus episode that I did, I put out on Patreon and I actually dropped it live to where other people were joining that Patreon bonus episode and we were all watching or listening to it together. And that was kind of cool because they would comment, you know, holy shit, when they would hear something just totally crazy. And I would comment back, yeah, that's what I was thinking. And it was just live. We were all listening to it together. It was like they were in the room with me. And that was fun. I'm going to do that again as well. So that's some examples of engagement. And to answer your second question, absolutely. I do cases and accept suggestions for cases that listeners send in. As a matter of fact, I love it. Tell me if you've got something you want me to cover, let me know. And chances are I'll cover it. I've covered several cases on this podcast based off of a listener sending me the information. I actually had a listener for the Bad Teachers series that I did send me the names. I was unaware of that case. And when I dug into it, I'm like, wow, I got to tell this one.
Do you know the number one thing that surprises engaged couples? Take a guess. The sheer amount of decisions they have to make while planning a wedding. Indoors or outdoors? How many guests? Are kids invited? Controversial. Which cake flavor? Seriously, how do you even begin to figure out what's right for you? That's where Zola comes in. Zola has everything you need to make every wedding decision a piece of cake, from choosing your dream wedding venue and vendors to deciding how to best spend your budget. With tons of customizable wedding websites, save the dates, and invites, every detail will feel like you. Zola will even help you choose the gifts, experiences, and cash funds you really want. The next thing you know, you've planned your whole wedding all in one place. From getting engaged to getting married, Zola has everything you need to plan your wedding in one place. Start planning at Zola.com. That's ZOLA.com.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. And now I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun, Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free and each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
And so, yes, not only will I take those suggestions, I'll actually do it. So thank you for that question. All right, Miss Grace Payne asks, has podcasting about scandals and crime changed your perspective on crime and justice? I would say yes, it changed my perspective. I knew these crimes existed. I did not know the levels to crime and just the absolute insanity of some people, I think, until I started actually digging into cases. The levels people will go to hide things, especially with Exposed and some of the Diddy situation. You know, it blows my mind he got away with that stuff for 20 plus years. And so, yeah, in a way, it changed my perspective. I didn't really understand money could get you out of just about anything until I started doing Exposed. So thank you for that question. Jacob Brown says, have you ever felt unsafe because of the topics you discuss? I'm careful. You can't do what I do and function off fear. All right, Miss Addie Jones says, what has been your favorite episode to create and why? Great question, Miss Addie. And I'll tell you, probably, they're all my favorite. It's kind of like my kids. All my kids are my favorites. But I'll tell you, one of the ones that I had the most interest in creating was the Bad Teacher series. And all of the ones I've covered so far. And the reason for that is I think this is a major problem right now in the United States, probably globally, but I haven't looked into globally. In the United States, it's a major problem. And I know the importance of podcasting about it and the difference that it can make. So I don't know if favorite episode or favorite series is the right term, because I wish there was nothing out there for me to cover, but certainly I enjoy the fact that I have the opportunity to blast people that are doing disgusting shit like that. I think that's the best way to sum that up. So thank you for that question. Matthew Clark says, what are your future plans for the podcast? Look, great question. And you got great timing, because I'll give you a few of the series that we have coming out, and look for the trailers on these and some teaser stuff that I've done at the very start of January. As a matter of fact, if you're a patron member, you're going to get it before that. We've got some really interesting stuff coming out. I've got a series on Conor McGregor. If you're familiar with him, he's a absolute star in MMA. And recently he was found guilty of sexual assault against a hairdresser in Ireland. And I have just about every document from that case. It's going to be several episodes. It'll be probably a 3-part series. That'll be coming to you soon. I have a series coming out on another MMA fighter. I know, a lot of MMA fighters, but I have one coming out that's absolutely going to blow your mind, and it's called War Machine. And it is about a guy named John Copenhaver was dating a porn star, a very popular porn star. I'll keep that name secret right now. They were in a very tumultuous, toxic relationship, beating her all the time, that sort of thing. Well, one night, he came home after they had already broken up. He went to her house, opens up the door, and there she is laying. She had a new boyfriend, and they were in the bed together, and he almost killed her. And the only reason he did not kill her was she escaped. That's all I'm going to tell you right now. But the name of that series is called War Machine. And that one's kind of dear to me because I know there's a lot of females, especially out there, that suffer from domestic violence. A lot of females out there that are in these toxic relationships and they don't know how to get out. And this is a great story of how to do that. So that'll be coming to you in January for sure. So look for some teasers on that coming out and a bunch of other stuff. But that's two that I'll go ahead and give you right now. And Miss Arabella Lee, she says, I've got 3 questions. What does your research process look like when you're preparing for an episode? How do you verify the accuracy of the information you present? And have you ever encountered a case that was difficult to research and why? All right, so I'll take those in order. What does your research process look like? Well, Google is our friend here at Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite. And look, research for one episode takes 8 to 12 hours. So that process varies from case to case. Some of these I have inside contacts that I'm not going to reveal, nor would I ever. But in some of these cases, I have inside information that is being sent to me. And that's how I research it. Usually that has to do with legal documents. So that's one way I do it. Another way is, for example, if one of you listeners sent me a name and you said, do a podcast on this person, it's a very interesting case, and I look into it and I don't know much about it, I Google it, but I'll go off of verified articles, okay? I'm not Googling it and one person's talking to another person and they're just putting out their thoughts on a case. I'm going off of news articles, things like that. And I know sometimes the news is full of shit. I get it. But I'm going off of typically verified information and verified sources. And as of recently, I actually have one of the top research companies in the country, Rachel Spiller's Research, that assist us with researching these cases and pulling documents for us, things like that. And so in the episodes that are dropping now and will drop in the future, you're also going to have a source page on the show notes. So you can go to those sources and you can see where we're getting all this information, unless it was a secret source, a protected source that passed us that information. Of course, we're not going to put that in there. But the majority of what we get, believe it or not, is from court documents, which kind of answers the second question, which was how do you verify the accuracy? Look, if it's a court case and it's been closed and adjudicated, it's easy because that is the gospel, right? Public record right there. So they're easy in that case. You can't always verify the accuracy because sometimes you're going off of someone's word. I just posted an episode where we were talking about Jay-Z and some inconsistencies in what the female that was accusing Jay-Z of being with Diddy during this particular instance. And there was some inconsistencies that came out there. Well, that's questionable. Not saying that what she said isn't true, but it creates questions. So when I report that and everybody else on God's Green Earth reported it, we're going off of her lawsuit. If she's lying, it'll come out in the wash. We try to be as accurate as possible. And the best rule of thumb there is if you're going off of a story or information, you need to find 3 credible sources to back that up. And that's what we try to do. Have you ever encountered a case that was particularly difficult to research and why? All the time would be the answer to that question. I have a case list, y'all, that there's a ton of cases I haven't dropped because the information is so hard to find. And I'll say in Exposed, in what we do there, a lot of times it's when we're covering like bad teachers where juveniles involved because there's a lot of information there, but a lot of it is redacted. So it's harder to find. It's harder to cover. And then there's some cases, especially in the crime related stuff that I cover, like let's say a cold case. Well, a cold case only has so much information. That's why it's cold. If all the information was there, you could cover the case from start to finish. Sometimes it's very hard to find, but that's where a research company really comes into play. So thank you for that question. And the last one for today, this one comes from Brad Picard. Shout out, Brad. And he says, the question is for the Ask Me Anything episode. I was wondering, where do you get the information for the different episodes? Great question. Kind of half answered this earlier, but I'll get into a little more detail on that. Primarily legal documents. So I have probably 20 different subscriptions to different court systems around the country. A lot of times it is a matter of just downloading documents. And look, these things aren't free. They're about 15 to 20 cents a page, and some of them are 70, 80 pages. Just depends on the case. But we do what we have to do around here to get that information. And as I mentioned earlier, I do have some sources that give me information, and I do have cases where it's just a lot of grinding online to locate what it is I need to locate. And again, that's why I have the best researcher on God's Green Earth that helps me out with all of that. So thank you for that question, Brad Picard. That's all I'm going to cover today. Look, it is the 23rd of December. We all need to get to celebrating. So go spend time with your family. Thank you for spending time with me. And look, heartfelt right here. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. And I want to thank all of you so much for making 2024 just a bomb-ass year for me and for Exposed. We couldn't do it without you. Big things coming in 2025. Stay tuned for all that. I love every single one of you for everything you do for me. Thank you to all the Patreon members for making this show worth it. And I promise you keep loving it, and I will keep bringing it. Now, December 26th, dropping a second volume of Murdaugh's Jailhouse Phone Calls. If you thought the first one was interesting, you're really going to find this one interesting. I've got 10 volumes of this, so I drop them every now and then. I'm going to drop that second volume on the 26th of December, the day after Christmas. And until next time, for Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.
ET is Ryan Seacrest here. People always say it's good to unwind, but that's easier said than done. The exception, Chumba Casino. They actually make it easier done than said, or at least the same. Chumba Casino is an online social casino with hundreds of casino-style games like slots and blackjack. Play for fun. Play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Sign up now and collect your free welcome bonus at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply.